Thinking is not a small thing. Thinking is not secondary. Thinking is not a harmless passing movement in the mind. Thinking is formative. Thought is the seed within the mind, but thinking is the living treatment of that seed. This is the 7-minute daily focus. Day 89 of 365. To focus on the world within, from the world without. Today's focus, the law of thinking, thinking as seed. Pause for a moment. Thinking is not a small thing. Thinking is not secondary. Thinking is not a harmless passing movement in the mind. Thinking is formative. Thought is the seed within the mind, but thinking is the living treatment of that seed. Thinking is what stays with it. Thinking is what gives it continuity. Thinking is what allows what is within to begin unfolding toward physical expression. So when we speak of thinking as seed, we are speaking of its formative role. We are speaking of the fact that thinking carries consequence. Thinking carries direction. Thinking carries development. Whatever you continually think upon, you are not merely observing. You are sustaining. You are feeding. You are giving process to. This is why thinking matters. Pause. What is within is primary. What is physically seen is secondary. Thought is within, effect is without. Thinking stands between. That means thinking is never neutral. If thinking remains with what is within, unfolding continues. If thinking becomes governed by what is physically seen, interruption begins. So the question is never simply, what do I want? The deeper question is, what am I sustaining through thinking? Because thinking is not just passing through the mind. Thinking is carrying the mind in a direction. And where thinking goes with continuity, physical expression follows in time. Thinking determines outcome, not because thinking forces reality, not because thinking manipulates life, but because thinking sustains what is recognized within or abandons it for what is physically seen. This is the distinction. Active thinking is aware of itself. Active thinking knows it is thinking. Active thinking chooses direction from within, and active thinking stays with the seed. Passive thinking reacts. Passive thinking drifts. Passive thinking is governed by appearances, and passive thinking gives authority to what is physically seen. So when thinking becomes passive, the mind becomes unstable, and instability delays physical expression. But when thinking becomes active, the mind stays ordered, and ordered thinking supports unfolding. This is why thinking in practice behaves as seed, because what thinking repeatedly carries, it begins to organize. What thinking continually returns to, it begins to establish. And what thinking holds with continuity, it begins to unfold. Recognition must remain within. If you recognize from within, thinking serves what is true. If you recognize from what is physically seen, thinking becomes reaction. And reaction is not creation. Reaction is not unfolding. Reaction is not authority. And reaction is the surrender of direction to appearance. So do not ask appearance for permission to remain with what is within. Do not look to the world without to confirm what has already been established in the world within. Recognition within is origin. Recognition from appearance is secondary. And whatever thinking serves, that is what begins to gain continuity in the mind. If thinking is interrupted, unfolding is delayed. This is why scattered thinking weakens physical expression. This is why double movement in the mind delays what is seeking to unfold. And this is why uncertainty produces instability. You cannot sustain one thing within and then continually turn your thinking toward its opposite through reaction. That is division, that is interruption, and that is delay. But when thinking remains with what is within, continuity is preserved. And continuity allows unfolding to continue toward physical expression. This is where steadfastness becomes power, not doubtfulness, not struggle, not force, and not pressure. But steadfastness, focused, remain aligned with what is within. Do not be moved by what is physically seen, because what is physically seen is always secondary to what is unfolding. Thinking as seed means this. Your thinking is not to be treated casually. Your thinking is not to be left wandering. Your thinking is not to be handed over to appearances. Your thinking must be held with intention. Your thinking must be sustained with recognition. And your thinking must remain aligned with origin, because the way you think is the way you continue. And the way you continue determines the manner of unfolding. Thinking requires position. You must think from within, not occasionally, not when it feels easy, but as position. To think from within is to remain in the primary. It is to remain with cause. It is to remain with what is true before what is physically seen rearranges itself. This is patience, not waiting in uncertainty, but sustained alignment. Thinking does not need panic. Thinking needs position. Thinking needs continuity. And thinking needs steadiness. You are not trying to make reality happen. You are allowing what already is to unfold. So today, let your thinking be ordered. Let your thinking be active. Let your thinking remain with what is within. Let it stop reacting to what is physically seen. Let it stop borrowing direction from appearances, and let it return to origin, because when thinking is aligned, the seed is sustained. And when the seed is sustained, unfolding continues. And when unfolding continues, physical expression must follow. Consider this carefully. Thinking does not begin when you notice it. Thinking is already in motion. The question is not whether you are thinking. The question is whether you are aware of what you are sustaining. Because awareness changes the nature of thinking. When you become aware, thinking becomes directed. When you are unaware, thinking becomes carried by appearance. So mastery begins here, not by controlling every thought, not by resisting what appears, but by recognizing where your thinking is positioned. If your thinking is positioned within, it draws from origin. If your thinking is positioned toward what is physically seen, it becomes reaction. And reaction is always unstable, because what is physically seen is always changing, but what is within does not change. It is constant. It is actual. It is the ground from which all expression unfolds. So when you return your thinking to what is within, you are returning to stability. You are returning to order. You are returning to the place where unfolding can continue without interruption. This is why continuity is power, not intensity, not force. Continuity, a calm, steady, unwavering return to the same recognition, a quiet refusal to be moved by what is physically seen, a sustained alignment with what has already been established within. This is thinking as seed in its purest form, because the seed does not rush, the seed does not panic. The seed unfolds according to its nature when it is left undisturbed, and your thinking either disturbs or it protects. So ask yourself throughout the day, am I protecting the seed, or am I disturbing it through reaction? Am I returning to what is within, or am I being pulled by what is physically seen? Each moment of recognition restores order. Each return to within strengthens continuity. Each act of active thinking nourishes unfolding. And over time, what is sustained becomes undeniable, not because you forced it, but because you remained with it. This is the quiet discipline of thinking. This is the unseen work that produces visible results. Remain with it. Stay with it. Let thinking serve what is within. Now, the affirmation for day 89. Pause for a moment. My thinking is not casual. My thinking is formative. I think from within. I remain with what is true within. I do not follow what is physically seen. I do not surrender to reaction. I sustain the seed through active thinking. I remain aligned with origin. I remain steadfast. I remain continuous. And because I remain, unfolding continues. And what unfolds must physically express. Remember, by design, by focus,